Good evening, my name is Helen Anthony. I'm the councilwoman for Ward 2 and chairman of the Providence Finance Committee. I am calling to order our regular meeting Tuesday, May 16, 2023 at 7:34. Now, clerk, would you please take the roll?
Chairwoman Helen Anthony,
Present.
Vice Chairman Juan Pichardo,
Present.
Councilman James Taylor is absent, Councilor Sue Engelbart,
Present.
Councilor Miguel Sanchez.
Present.
We have 4 present, 1 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much, and I'd just like to recognize our senior assistant city solicitor, Ken Cheverini. We also have Councilor David Hall joining us, and we have our clerk. Please. With that, I would like to have a motion to waive the reading of items number 1 through 4.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Vanderbilt, seconded by Councilor Pichardo. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Wonderful. And now I would like to see if we can entertain a motion. I'd like to take the departments out of order. Make a motion to start with the Board of Canvassers, second vital statistics, and third law department. And that motion.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So that motion was made by Councilor Sanchez, seconded by Councilor Pichardo. Reversed. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start with the Board of Canvassers this evening.
Madam Chair, as the committee chair, as it's standard, we will take our oath of, and then the other is fine.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, everybody ready to be sworn in?
Please raise your right hand. I do swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
I do.
And please state your name for the record.
Lawrence Mancini, Chief Financial Officer, City Clerk.
Crystal Linder, Deputy Finance Secretary.
Michael Narducci, Administrator of Elections.
Renee Carlson, Administrator, Board of Canvassers.
Well, thank you so much, Chief Mancini. Would you like to kick us off this evening?
Thank you, Madam Chair, once again, and the committee and the council, as is the standard procedure with these matters. We got Finance Director and Deputy Lead Director, the summary of the budget, and remarks, of course, if there are questions associated with budget items, and of course, the department and the division will conduct their presentation and their available any questions. So with that, thank you. Director Satis.
Director Silveria, thank you so much. And Assistant Director, thank you so much. I'm just gonna first of all mark as exhibit number 17, the presentation on the Board of Canvassers budget. Motion made by Councilor Pichardo, seconded by Councilor Sanchez. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Thank you, Director.
Tonight, we're starting with the Board of Canvassers. If you're following along in your budget book, we're on page 85. This is not a revenue generating department. And moving on to salaries, total salaries in fiscal 24 are proposed at $771,502. This represents a decrease of $168,006 from the 23 budget. There are no requested organizational changes. There is a decrease in the election officials and temp line items due to the election cycle. Total benefits for fiscal 24 are proposed at $286,038. This is an increase of $101 over the 23 budget. Moving on to services, total services in 2024 proposed at $137,300. This is a decrease of $86,000 from the 23 budget, and the decrease in expenses is due to the election cycle. Total supplies in fiscal 24 are proposed at $6,000, and this is a decrease of $9,000 from the 23 budget. There's no capital expense in this department. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Director Naguchi to give an overview of his department and to answer questions.
Thank you, Director.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Michael Naguchi, I'm the Administrator of Elections for the City of Providence. Brand new, just started in March. Basically, our department, we're responsible for running elections. We work conjunctly with the Secretary of State's office and the Board of Elections to provide adequate elections in the city. Currently, we have a couple of special elections coming up, as we are all aware of it. We're working on that. That calendar kicks off the end of the month. We're also working in our office on list maintenance. One of our big objectives is going to be voter turnout. We really want to work on voter turnout here in the city. How we do that, we get our office out to the public, go to events, and set up voter registration tables and really reach out to the voters. The other thing we're working on is list maintenance. We're going through the NCOA process, National Change of Address. That's done through the United States Postal Service. That is when a voter gets a notification that they moved or may have moved. They have the opportunity to fix that. Prior to 2020, we did it once every 2 years. Under the Let RI Vote bill that passed last year, we now do it 4 times a year if time allows. Because under federal and state law, we cannot do any kind of list maintenance 90 days prior to an election.
I might ask a question. So it was, I think you presented some materials, so you purged 19,000 from the voter rolls in January of this year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I'm sorry, and now you're doing it 4 times a year. What prompts that? What prompts the notice to go out?
So basically, we work with the United States Postal Service. The state actually works with the United States Postal Service. They get a report of anybody who did an address change within the state of Rhode Island over the last 6 months or so. So if you did a change of address through the USPS, but you never updated your voter registration with us, we're going to get a notice saying this person's address may have changed. So the state sends out 2 notices, one to the old address that we have on file, one to the new address on file. And then the voter responds to us saying, yes, I moved to my new address. Then if they don't respond, then the law allows us to update them to their new address if it's within city or town. If it's outside of city and town, then the law allows us to make that voter inactive.
So you can automatically update that even if they don't respond.
If they don't
they're
respond.
living in Providence.
Correct. Yep. If they're living in Providence, we update it to the new address. And everything is done by notice. So the voter gets a notice at their new address saying we received information through the United States Postal Service, and we've updated your address.
Okay, and then I just have a question on your salary. So there's a decrease of 168.6 from the fiscal year 23 budget. Why is that if we have a couple of special elections?
So
Sorry.
okay. So basically, in an election year, we in the budget we provide, I think it's 4 positions for temporary staff. And being a non-election, being a special election, we haven't budgeted for those 4 additional positions. I don't believe we're going to need them. We're predicting roughly a 10 to 15% turnout in the special election for CD1. It comprises of about 33 polling places. We're hoping to get some help from the General Assembly on maybe combining some of our polling places. Because a lot of our polling places are in schools, and schools are not required to be open. Are not required to be open for general elections, but for special elections, they remain open. So we may have to relocate 9 out of our 33 polling places to other locations.
And that process, I'm just going to say, is very confusing for our voters, having represented voters for a while now. How do you get the news out when you change your?
So basically, state statute requires us to send a notice to any voter that the polling place is combined. So if we do, in a perfect world, and I don't really like saying that term, but we would be able to open up every polling place for every election. But it's hard. We've got, it's a national issue hiring poll workers. election officials. Years and years ago, we used to have an abundance of polling officials. Since 2020, it seems like people just do not want to work the polls. We're going through our list now for the special, and we're having issues. We had to actually go out to our neighbors in Johnston, Cranston. We reached out to Warwick saying, hey, you guys don't have the special in CD1. Can you help us out with some poll workers? So again, if anybody's interested in serving as a poll worker and an election official for that day, feel free to give us our office a holler.
And how do they apply for, how would someone know how to apply if they were interested?
They can contact our office, 680-5525.
Do you advertise or put out a notice at all?
We actually, I don't know if we'll do it for this election, but for next year, when we're opening up all polling places, we probably will work with maybe 311 and put out a notice on that. We also have a link on our website to the election, the poll worker application, and it is online.
Okay. And then this last election, the November election, how did it seem to me that there were some problems around the city?
Statewide. It was a statewide issue.
Okay, can you please tell me about that?
Sure, it was a statewide issue of finding poll workers. We had over 167 poll workers do no show, no call on election day. That is after they had successfully taken the training session and taken the quiz, and they just opted no. So we were fortunate in the city of Providence that our turnout was low enough that we could rearrange some of our poll workers to go to those more densely populated areas so that we were able to open on time.
Open but not really. There were long lines.
There were long lines in some precincts, yes, but we were able to open on time.
And I imagine that, so they all went through the training, but they didn't show up the day of.
That's normal.
What is the percentage of people that train but don't show up the day of?
It can vary. Since COVID, it's gotten rapidly worse. I'm going to say maybe about 35% no show, no call. That is why you would see me in some cases the night before, where they're looking for folks. I'm in the office at 4:45 on the day of the election to handle no calls and transfers.
Okay. All right. Committee members. Yes, Councilor Pichardo.
Thank you very much. In reference to the poll workers, what is the current pay right now? Is there any proposal to increase it? Because I hear that as people are calculating it by hours, right? They have to show up at 6 a.m. Out by like 8:30, 9 o'clock p.m. That's like
Providence pays the most of us in Federal Island. We pay clerks and wardens $250, supervisors $200, greeters or door monitors $175.
so that comes out to like hourly wage of
About $12 or $13 an hour,
so
and
is
it's
there,
non-taxed.
yeah, is there any proposal to increase that?
During COVID, we gave them an incentive because it was a period of COVID, we had actual fund for that. But as of this time, we have not budgeted for, actually had any compensation across the state to increase poll worker compensation.
Is there, by the way, Mr. Abuji, welcome back to that.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank
Any opportunities for grants for civic participation with the state or federal?
Not on the horizon. I don't see any. We ran out of HAVA funds. The state has no more HAVA funds, which was the Help America Vote Act funds. You won't see any, whether in 2024, you may see some civic grants through the Center for Tech and Civic Life. That's where we got a lot of, some of our funding from in 2020. But right now, I don't see any opportunities for grants out there.
Yes, Councilor Vanderbilt.
Thank you for being here and for all your work. Just a very quick question. Under fees not classified, that goes up by $10,000 this year. What are fees not classified and why is it increasing in a election year?
We're going to have the special elections, we're gonna have to pay for postage, or rather, I'm gonna say advertising and projo themselves. Things like that could cost up to $1,500 to $2,000 per ad. So ads like that would go to different papers, Valley Breeze, that to be part of it, we have to sometimes get grants or so, or special equipment on the day of the election. That's all part of fees not classified.
Okay, but why would it be more this year than last year if there were more, if there were monthly? Because like postage and marketing are separate line items, which have gone down, if that makes sense, but he's not classified, is that mostly just grants? I mean, it's a small amount of money, but it still seems weird that.
We anticipate it because next year is an election year.
And we have 3 elections this year too.
We have the
So we have the
PPP,
presidential preference.
the
Oh,
primary, we have
okay,
the general.
yeah,
election.
April, I'm sorry, April.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, Councilor Fajardo.
In reference to, what's it called? To mine, in reference to advertising. State law or even probably an ordinance or law in terms of advertising major newspaper.
Yes.
Can you speak to, can you enlighten us in terms of the advertising in the city of Providence? Where does it get published and how can we improve that?
So currently, we do advertising for the warrant, which announces the election. We're also required under state statute to advertise the last day for voter registration. There is a bill being introduced in the General Assembly now to change that ad requirement, to change it from making it the last day for voter registration to announcing early voting. And that's been introduced in the House side. It has not been introduced on the Senate side yet.
Yes, please.
Does the bill still going to be dictating in the sense of where we advertise?
It says it's the way the statute reads, Kaufman, is it has to be in a newspaper of general circulation. So Projo, Valley Breeze, the type of times, but, stuff like that. So we pretty much centralize on Projo because we really don't have a local media market per se.
So I know we've gone through this for a long time. Communities have changed. People are not reading the newspaper. Can't even get it at the library. And I can speak for the area that I represented and also not represent. Pretty much, I think there's probably like 10 people reading the Providence Journal, right?
Correct.
And so is there a plan to advertise in other newspaper that are not in major circulation or as defined in state law?
I mean, we can advertise in any newspaper. I mean, it's just going to be general circulation. So we can advertise in Spanish newspaper, for instance. We can do that. We can do the Projo. I agree with you 110%. They really don't read the newspaper. So what we're considering doing is probably a mailing to all voters in the district. And not necessarily maybe to all voters, but at least to the household where voters are registered, and having, a little informational packet that gives them their 3 options how to vote. First, you've got, you can vote by mail, you can vote early, you can vote at the polling place on election day.
Yeah.
On that mailing, giving them their polling location.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I would encourage in a sense to, just in general, when people receive these local newspapers, whether they're Spanish or Jewish Times,
Yeah.
I think that people can benefit from engaging in the civic participation and not so dependently on Projo or now Boston Globe.
Right.
That anyone
Exactly.
read it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Is the plan for Senate District 1 to align with the special election conventional or?
Yes, sir. Yeah, so basically the primary day will be the same. The primary is September 5th, the election is November 7th. The declaration, because of the way the state statute reads, the declaration period is different. The declaration for Senate 1 is the end of July, where for CD 1 it's June 28th and 29th. But yes, the way the statute reads is that anytime there's a vacancy in the General Assembly, you're able to have a special election. You have to have it within 70 to 90 days, unless you can't sit that senator or representative for the session. And currently, we would not have been able to sit the senator for this particular session. So it gave us the ability to go to those dates to save us some money.
Okay, I just have a final question. I was wondering, the rental of land and buildings, so we were, the budget was 15,000 in 2023, it's decreased to 5,000. What are we renting?
We have to pay for some of the locations to utilize them. We sometimes use churches, private offices, or so we have to pay those locations.
Great, Madam Auditor.
This should address that. Could you go through the personnel because something is not lining up here? According to the ordinance, you can only have 2 clerk boards and 1 clerk for by law. You have that and a clerk for teller. And in your budget, you have a clerk 3 by law, which I'm sure is just should be a clerk 4. So you have a limited in there. And that's 9 and this is 9. So I'm kind of don't know what's missing.
So if I'm not mistaken, the clerk for limited is a position that we hire for an election, and it would be a person that would be hired limited for that election cycle. And so when they're hired in that position, they are not allowed to bid out of that job until the election is over. So that is a limited position.
Which one is it then?
That's the one that is noted as clerk board of canvassers limited. There's 4 allowed, but we're funding 1.
What is this limited? I don't
I'm
see-
looking at the person on.
Okay, I'm looking at his old chart. Because there's 9 here, and there's 9 here, so I don't know which one.
So I'm not sure which one is the limited one.
Okay, and secondly, does that mean that the temporary line item does not pay for that salary, they pay that as a regular?
Yeah, that was a change that happened a few years ago, that we had to offer it to union staff first.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? I'd just like to thank both of you for the work you do for the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for your support. Okay, we have a housekeeping matter. Sorry, I didn't have the agenda this morning. So actually, agenda item number 1. Have a motion to go to reading. Second. Okay, so moved by Councilor Charter, seconded by Councilor Anderson. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. So this was the, we were going to be appointing Stephanie Lopes as licensed administrator and registrar of vital statistics, but Stephanie is unable to appear before us. The time is expiring of her appointment, so what we're doing, I'm asking for you to do this evening is deny without prejudice. That way, when Stephanie can come before before she will be, we will get to see a new matter on council agenda, and that will be for.
Okay.
So it's not that we're at all denying her appointment, she cannot be available at the time is expired. So if I could have a motion to deny without prejudice. Okay, motion made by Councilor Anderson, seconded by Councilor Sanchez. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. All right, back to our list. So now we are going to be entertaining the board of licenses along with vital statistics.
That's correct. Well, Madam Chair, the committee member of the council is joined this evening by the deputy administrator, as it used to be, CEO of the city. So there, we get to the record.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Yes. Read into the record the budget for vital statistics.
So we have the budget for vital statistics. If you're following along your budget book, we're on page 84. Revenue in this department is budgeted at $260,500 for fiscal 24. This is a decrease of $76,000 from the 2023 budget. And this is due to a decrease in service demand and 35 copies. Total salaries in fiscal 24 are proposed at $199,798. This is a decrease of $28,498 from the 23 budget. The department has requested to defund one clerk for a savings of $41,260 due to that decreased service demand. Moving on to benefits, total benefits for fiscal 24 are proposed at $159,213, a decrease of $1,703 from the 23 budget. Total services in fiscal 24 are proposed $10,000, a decrease of $1,100 from the 23 budget. And supplies for 2024 proposed at $1,500, which is consistent with the 23 budget. And here I will pause and hand it over to Deputy Director Juicy and Chief Hawkins to talk about the department.
Madam Chair, how are you? Thank you. Members of the committee.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me tonight. As you guys know, I'm Jose, Deputy License Administrator for Board of License and Vital Statistics. Just to share a little bit of background, Vital Statistics, we issue marriage, death, and birth certificates, as well as ID PVDs. Basically, the ID PVD came about with the previous administration back in 2018. Since then, we've processed over about 3,000 IDs for Providence residents and only Providence residents. And as Sarah was mentioning, the decrease in revenue had a lot to do with Department of Health's rollout and deployment of the new Ritter software, which is where we process any request for a vital record. With that said, we since that deployment in 2022, a lot of funeral directors, we had a lot of foot traffic, and the reason for the decreases is mainly because they can do so in their hometown now. They don't necessarily have to come to Providence. Obviously, we know that there's a challenge with parking based on some feedback that we've received from funeral directors and other constituents of the office. And it's just made an impact. So that's why we decided we had 5 clerks, so we decided to just decrease that and eliminate that one position and bring it down to 4. That's pretty much it.
Okay, just a couple of questions. Why are certified copies, the revenue from certified copies? So would be the decrease of 76,000. Is that because of the death certificates?
So the decrease there for certified copies it has a lot to do with that, but also birth, marriage, and death all get placed on a certified certificate, which is a thing that we get from the Department of Health. So that's an increase, right? On certified, but a decrease. Okay. Excuse me. So that decrease has to do with my explanation on Department of Health deployment of the new River software.
So you don't have to come to Providence anymore if you were born in Providence to get a birth
Yeah.
certificate, for example. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
You can go anywhere in the state.
Yeah. So anything after 1960, they're really working on digitizing a lot of these records. Anything before 1960, we have what's called a legacy record, which is in our back room. So if you were born before 1960, you would come into the office and request a vital record for anything from that date and before. So 1960 and forward to present, you can obtain from anywhere in the state of Rhode Island, not necessarily in our office. So that's also part of my explanation with, for example, Quinn Funeral Home. They can just go right up the street to Warwick Town Hall and avoid and save a trip having to come to Providence just for a certified record.
Wonderful. Okay, and then the repairs to office equipment.
So that the repairs to office equipment has a lot to do with our aging printers, which are obviously a critical function of the department. Without those printers, we wouldn't be able to operate the office, other than marriage licenses and ID DVDs, because those are done through a separate method. So that has. So since then, in 2023, I mean, our vital statistics printer has like close to 2 million copies on it. And since then, we actually just had a brand new Ricoh printer delivered today to the office, and we're waiting for pickup on the old. So that should offset the amount of repairs that we're performing on these older machines.
Committee members. Yes, Counselor.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question. So for the clerk the clerk position that was eliminated, was there a clerk in that position who also got eliminated, or was it vacant?
It was vacant and but funded.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Counselor Sanchez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Can you explain for folks that might not be aware of what exactly IDPD is?
So IDPVD is basically a program for undocumented people, and they can come in, just show proof of residency, or we'll accept a letter from the landlord as long as it's notarized, just stating that that individual lives at the Providence address, and just a valid form of ID. So it could be from a foreign government, it could be a passport, as long as it's valid. They can come in, present those to the clerks or myself, and we process their IDPVD, and it's $15 for the ID, and anybody over 65 is $5, and if you're experiencing hardship, it's also $5, but you would have to show evidence of that. So the IDPVD just helps folks obtain some sort of identification. So, for example, they get pulled over by a police officer, they don't have any means of an ID, the IDPVD would serve, as identification. But they can also use it for discounts throughout the city at many different places. There's a variety of different places that they can use it for. And it's also, you can use that at the Providence Library or any library in the city of Providence for that matter. And that's, so what happens is we submit an application and it goes out to a third-party vendor and then out of state, and they print the ID and they mail it to the customer.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Counselor Charter.
How many inspectors are there now?
For BOL,
Yeah,
for
just,
We haven't gotten to BOL. We're just doing vital statistics, and we're gonna do BOL next.
for vitals, we don't have any inspectors.
no inspectors
No inspectors.
directly under finance.
Correct.
I know that the changes at the state level, that now anyone can get their birth certificate somewhere else. Do you expect to see less usage of people coming through? Have you seen a decline? At what rate do you think that is at?
It's a pretty high rate. I've seen just from, experience and, post-COVID and pre-COVID, I've seen a drastic decrease since the new deployment of the new River software. I do expect this number to continue to maybe slowly progress and decline on a downward slope. However, that could change. A lot of folks come in for birth certificates when they have to renew their licenses, and obviously those are staggered. So that's why I say it might be a very slow downward slope, because as those driver's licenses become expired, folks are coming in for a birth certificate because they're required at the DMV. So, some folks may have their license before they're able to get a real ID next year or the following year after that. And that cycle is going to continue, I believe, for a few years, just because I don't know exactly when the real ID was, but that's just an example when that was first rolled out by the state. We've seen a trend an increase of folks coming in, specifically stating why they're here. And for other purposes as well, legal purposes, things like that.
Thank you.
Okay. Also, I just want to take a moment and mark as exhibit number 820, the presentation on vital statistics. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Counselor Anderson, seconded by Counselor Sanchez. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. Now we're going to move right on to board of licenses, which we will mark that as exhibit number 19. Thank you. All right. Motion made by Councilor Ingebaugh, seconded by Councilor Pichardo. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Let's talk about the board of licenses.
Okay, I'm moving on to Board of Licenses. If you're following along in your budget book on page 86. This is a revenue generating department, and the total revenue is budgeted at $1,613,400 for fiscal year 24. This is an increase of $168,300 over the fiscal year 23 budget. And this department has recovered from any reduction we saw due to COVID. So we're back to pre-pandemic levels of revenue. Moving on to expenditures, total salaries for fiscal 24 are close to $612,739. This is an increase of $91,655 over the 23 budget. The department has made one organizational change and request, and that is for an additional licensed inspector at a cost of $50,961. Total benefits for fiscal 24 are proposed $311,817. This is a decrease of $7,461 from the fiscal year 23 budget. Moving on to services, total services for fiscal 24 are proposed at $145,850. This is an increase of $40,550 over the 23 budget. And the increase in supplies, total supplies for 24, fiscal 24 is proposed $44,500. This is an increase of $42,700 over the 23 budget. And this increase is for equipment for noise ordinance enforcement. And there is no capital budget for this department. And then over to Director and Chief of Police.
Thank you, Director. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thanks for having me again. You know, a little background on the Board of Licenses. We have 2 inspectors with 1 vacancy right now since I started in this department. I was the first inspector before I took the capacity of being the license administrator. The board's made up of 5 members and legal counsel, as well as city representation. The board processes, we administer roughly over 8,000 applications annually across all different license categories, which are some by state law and some by city ordinance. And we process a wide range of different licenses throughout the city. And well, the board meets twice a week. Where pre-COVID, they met 3 times a week. Now they meet twice, Wednesdays and Thursdays, Wednesdays at 12:30 here in the Alderman's chambers, and Thursdays at 4 p.m. also in the Alderman's chambers. Certain license categories that for licenses that we offer do have to get advertised and through the Providence Journal. And those are relatively just, you know, a 2-week ad, and on the 3rd week, those parties come before the board and present, you know, their what they intend to do. And with that, you know, the board also works with Providence Police Enforcement License Bureau. We have a sergeant, newly assigned sergeant, and we have 2 detectives from the Patrol Bureau, or the Detectives Bureau rather. And they do the day-to-day nightly checks of the lounges, clubs, and you know, restaurants that serve alcohol. And they just do compliance checks. They conduct compliance checks throughout the city. And so we work very closely with them when there's an incident in the city. We hold an emergency hearing. That's usually, depending on the severity, that's usually held at the public safety complex on either a Saturday or Sunday, depending on when the incident occurred. And from there, we work with legal counsel to take the appropriate action and schedule them before the board if needed. And the inspector, you know, she's great. She, Takita, she does also the day-to-day, you know, 8:30 to 4:30 compliance checks throughout the city. And both across all license categories, with the exception of liquor. Most of these places are open late night, and obviously, she's done at 4:30, so she can only conduct them up until then. She does like the motor vehicle repairs, food and holiday licenses. She does a secondhand auto stores, auto and stores, excuse me. Those are two different license categories. And any complaints that we receive through PVD 311, pawnbroker licenses, petroleum, and things of that nature. That's pretty much it.
Okay, and so the new hire, the vacant inspector that you're asking for a second, what will that person do?
That person will work, the schedule is Tuesday to Saturday, and it's 3 to 11. So that person will pretty much do the same thing as the first shift inspector, mostly focused and tailored towards noise complaints as well. Mobile food trucks, when I was an inspector, a lot of times I've noticed that people set up some during the day, but the majority at night. And an MFE permit is required from our office, which they first had to obtain a state MFE registration from DVR. So we work very closely with DVR. We work very closely with Department of Health, as well as Rhode Island Division of Taxation. And all of our licenses are staggered as far as their expiration dates.
And I'm sorry, how many are you looking for inspectors?
A total of 2. So one more. We have one that's currently in the role, and then just a second shift.
No, sorry, yeah, it would be 3.
Oh,
Madam
sorry.
Chair.
There is one currently filled, one vacant, and then we will be adding an additional.
So where's the third? What's the third one going to do?
Also nights, third shift, focus on noise, complaints, disturbances, working with the Providence police on some of the bigger enforcement issues.
Okay, and then the sergeants and detectives, what do they do? I'm getting confused as to what everyone's doing.
So, go ahead.
So the license, police enforcement, they do more of like the hours of operation, late night, after 2:30. So the inspector's already long gone before that. So they enforce state laws such as like bottle service, hours of operation, entertainment without licenses. The only difference with the inspectors is they can't cite a business or write them up. That needs a police report for our attorney, Mario Martone, to be able to kind of use as a guide. So the inspectors wouldn't be able to.
So the goal, Madam Chair, is that with the equipment, this is modeled similar to what they're doing in Newport, with the noise enforcement equipment. The inspectors will be able to cast a wider net to, monitor sites that we hear are violating noise ordinances or other things, and then call in additional police resources as they're identified. But we'll be able to be much more proactive on noise enforcement, along with other enforcement issues with those 2 inspectors.
Okay, and can I just follow up? I'm sorry, I'm going to open it up. I'm sorry to monopolize this. So the noise enforcement piece, which is a huge thing for the city, who's got the equipment, who's taking the equipment out, and who's trained on this? I just want to know.
We're going to train
through.
the 2 inspectors that we're hiring. We will train to work with the police to use deploy it, to be trained and use the equipment appropriately.
Okay, but they're not going to be able to cite.
That's right.
So they're going to call the police when they need help.
Exactly.
All right, and then why wasn't the vacant? Why has this been vacant? Why is there been
Hard
vacancy?
to understand that. When we came, we were also surprised by that,
Because
given the level of concern.
yeah, I'm just gonna say that, it's just, there are a lot of complaints about the way the OL is operating, in my opinion. That's what I've heard. I've witnessed it directly. I've been in, there are rules and regulations that are printed that don't seem to be followed. And so I'm just, who actually has oversight over this particular department?
I do.
Okay. So, just saying that I think I'd rather rather surprised. By the lack of, I think the thing, I'm just gonna say it right there on the record, it seems to me that there's some sort of misunderstanding as to who is responsible for the sidewalks outside of the clubs. Understood. And that, that for some reason, there's no response, that the clubs are not being held responsible for what's happening outside of their clubs with their patrons. And so I just, it's just not working. So anyway, Councilor Rainville.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for this presentation, for all you do. I have a few questions, one picking up where Chairwoman Anthony left off. So it looked like there was a $40,000 increase for the equipment for the noise ordinances, and then 2 inspectors who are gonna enforce the noise ordinance. But I think, so that's a lot of money. Not that noise isn't important, but that's a lot. My understanding, which I think I'm hearing now, is like they can't actually issue a citation. They have to call the police anyway. So like, what is the process? I'm complaining about noise. I'm probably calling the police anyway. Are we sending an inspector who's then gonna call the police? Like, I'm just, how many resources are we putting in
Yeah,
noise?
the idea is that this wouldn't just be complaint, right? We know where there are noise complaints often. We know where there are people who we've said, you better stop. We don't have the ability to follow up proactively and start to make it not about just people calling the police. And so the idea, and we're going to have to design a program. When we came in, it was clear that we didn't have the tools required to actually act on what we were being asked to act on.
Yeah.
So some of this will need to be designed if approved. We were able to do some research with the city of Newport that's gone a little bit further on their development, but we'll have to work through all that if we are approved to have these additional resources.
And would there be revenue from citations that would offset some of this cost, or would these be, like, is that part of the plan, or is that?
I don't know, we'll have to follow up on that.
Yes, please.
Maybe quick question probably is, under services, it says that there's offsetting revenue for the Providence Journal expense. What's the offsetting revenue?
It's in the advertising fees and the list of revenues, it's account 43590. So we're budgeting 83,500 for advertising fees in the revenue side.
Oh, okay.
Because people pay.
People are paying
Yeah.
to do that. Okay, so it's just right. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Those are my main ones. Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Jose, for this information. I know you're kind of filling in and probably taking on more responsibilities. So I mean, this kind of leads into a question. In a fully respected manner, it looks like if my numbers are correct, there's salary increases for you and the administrator by close to 9%. Is there anything that you guys are doing that justifies those?
The increases that were put in by the administration because the salaries were much lower than other departments. So as we start to look at parity across departments to ensure that we're, achieving more equivalent rates, that's why those increases were put in.
Thank you. And
They
then
did not ask for them, so I will.
it's okay. You did ask for them. Like, that's what we're here for, to have honest conversations. Is the salary a concern for the vacant inspector position that's been?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there was a lack of clarity around what that person should be doing, and so I would like us to, try to hire it under this new framework that we're looking at. So, at this point, I don't have any information to think of. It wasn't not filled because it wasn't prioritized previously, not because we couldn't get someone.
Yes, Councilor Pichardo.
Along those lines, and thank you to my colleagues for asking some of these questions. So thank you for the presentation. How long has the vacancy been?
For the second shift, so when I started as the inspector, it was January 2020, and that position was filled. At the time, it was occupied, there was somebody in that position.
Yeah.
But then just prior to COVID, which I believe was March 13th of 2020, she resigned. And so it's been vacant since COVID. And yeah,
Listen, a lot happened during COVID and as the administration has indicated that there were some decisions that were made, perhaps not increasing taxes or just the services in the inspecting businesses. And for full disclosure, I was a member of the board and also chairman of and there's always been an area that was very scrutinized, right? In terms of the board and how it actually with the inspectors, but also just having the inspectors during the day. And there were businesses that weren't even inspected for years. And I know since there's only been one inspector since 2020, so that goes already almost 3 years now. So that means that for the renewal, there will be many businesses that haven't been inspected or notified or collected for their fees. In terms of adding another person or inspector for second shift, to do more, but also the main focus, I think, for the communication that I'm getting from the administration is to deal with the noise. I personally don't see it yet, that it's dealing with the noise is that inspector's responsibility, because I've seen police officers showing up at 10 o'clock or even 9 o'clock trying to bring the noise down. And an inspector that does not have real power or authority as a law enforcement is very weak. The other is in terms of providing tickets. Where's the enforcement? We're hearing in a sense that for DPW, I believe, we're collecting 20%. So somehow we have to think about these positions here. So the other question I had was in terms of the board itself. Usually recall, even when I was chair, I didn't attend these type of meetings. So I guess my question is answered, but maybe you can answer, enlighten us. The chairman is not supposed to at least have some input on this or be present here?
No, I've in the 11 years I've been here, though.
No, that's fine. Maybe we're doing something different. That's why.
Maybe, with respect to your performance service to the board, it's traditionally the administrators that give testimony on the operation of the department. Purview of the board does reside with the chair, its membership, and its legal counsel.
They're the ones that
That's correct.
have oversight of the license.
That's correct. As you probably know, they conduct the actual legal hearings and procedures associated with enforcement or rulings associated with violations. The administrators, director or deputy, provide basically with due respect staff assistance to bring the matters before the court.
And part of what I ask is so that my colleagues can also know about the role. Who's the administrator that actually is the clerk, or is there a separate clerk for the board?
no, it's just stepping out. Or I, yeah.
Is it you or us?
We work together. So we just separate our tasks. So she'll do the pre-hearings when police forwards a violation. She'll do the notices to the businesses, and that the Providence Police Department has found a violation with respect to your establishment, and we schedule a pre-hearing. And that goes on that selected day, which is usually Thursdays in the morning. The police enforcement, the sergeant, and Mario Martone, they conduct the pre-hearings, and and it's usually represented by counsel. So the business owner have to come with an attorney, and they discuss the violation. They take a look at their history, and then depending on the resolution of that meeting, it goes on for disposition and review before the board, and that's when the matter is heard by the board.
Thank you. Any fees for the 3 a.m. soft closing licenses in addition to it?
There is, however,
How many 2 AM licenses are there available in the city of Providence right now?
right now, issued one,
Only one?
only one. And some things go into that, like your violation history, so not everybody qualifies for a 3 AM closing, excuse me, and there's also some confusion on what a 3 AM closing actually is. It's not what people think it is. It's a soft closing for a reason. And it's basically to mitigate nuisance and disturbances outside of the establishment rather than just forcing everybody out at 2 AM or 1 AM, depending on their license.
Does everybody know?
Yeah.
Can you just explain what
Yeah.
it is then?
Yeah, so 3 AM soft closing is basically liquor service stops at normal time, patrons stop entering at normal time, and from 2 to 3, lights are on, music is low, where after 45 minutes, music's completely off, and it's basically just a time for example, in the winter time, if somebody's waiting for an Uber or something like that, they can wait inside rather than pushing everybody out. And then that's when the crowd gets rowdy outside and the neighbors start getting, annoyed.
May I ask how that's enforced?
The 3 AMs.
Yeah.
So that's enforced by police who go around performing these compliance checks to make sure that they're adhering to the guidelines set forward by the board, which is technically state law. The 3 AM falls under a state statute. And but that's how it's enforced through police.
I believe it was also to help the police department, so all the clubs didn't come out all at the same time. They would have a fluctuation of time so that they could be at the different places.
That's perfect.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are there any fees being collected for the Hackney carriage charges? That's on the taxi, Uber, and all that stuff?
So that, it looks like it's very minimal, like maybe 2 or 3 from what it looks like, and the reason for that is because, and I say that because the fees are $67, yes, excuse me. The reason for that is obviously we've seen an uprising in Uber and Lyft, and we haven't quite figured out a way to license those because a lot of their parent companies aren't in Rhode Island. And so, but that's the reason why those numbers are low, is they're starting to kind of deteriorate and become obsolete.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, other questions?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please, Councilor Espinal.
Thank you. This will be quick. And this is a question perhaps for the Deputy City Solicitor. Could this inspector in any way be empowered to issue citations when they come across a disturbance?
Jeff, do you want me to, I think, we do have a similar process for DPW inspectors. So I don't see why not. I think we'd have to do the research.
What we need to do?
I think we'd have to look to see what the statute may provide, but I do know we have inspectors at DPW that are authorized to issue noticing violations for garbage and trash, as well as inspectors at inspection and standards. Now, I without looking at it, I don't know for sure, but I know there is a process where they're deputized to some extent. So we could look at that.
I think we should, because we're hiring this a couple of people, and they're gonna go up there, they are gonna come across certain issues, but their hands are gonna be tied. What they can do is just call the police.
Yeah.
We'll really get our money's worth if it will empower them to actually take action.
Yeah.
And then the other question will be, are they out to report on issues with the noise coming from businesses or also from residential? Like a backyard party, you get it out of it.
So residential is out of the board's purview, so we wouldn't be able to enforce anything residential unless something.
Unless we extend it.
Correct. Yeah, to that.
Sounds like Mr. Jerry has some homework.
And if I may, in addition to just noise, it's also, other license categories that for places that open later in the day that we just can't get to because they're closed. And things like that also, in addition to noise complaints.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I just have a few follow-up, the fees and fines and penalties are decreasing by 5,000. I am really concerned about, are we collecting our fees and fines and penalties? And I'd just like to know that from someone. Why that's decreasing. I believe that's what it says under your. Get back to me.
Yeah.
Okay, and then overtime. I'm wondering why it is we would be budgeting for overtime with our new hires. It was, you had 7,000 in 2023, and then you have proposed 5,000 for 2024.
That's a reduction in overtime, and the new FTEs are inspectors for a non-traditional, 8:30 to 4:30 shift, so that overtime would cover any sort of, needs the department has for overtime work during the traditional workday.
And if I may add,
Yeah.
Madam Chair, it's also during liquor renewal seasons. Liquor renewal seasons are very, it's a.
Yes.
Liquor renewal season is a very, high peak season for us, where sometimes that can come into play. We have over 480 liquor establishments in the city and counting. And those are by state law, December 1st. If you don't have your good standing by November 30th, technically you should be shut down the next day. And that's by state law. So for that time, we begin our campaign renewal for liquor renewals around August 31st, first week of September. And before you know it, it's November 30th.
All right, yes, Councilor.
The line for legal expenses, professional fees.
So legal expenses, that's mainly just for representing counsel for the board.
That's the fee that the council is paid.
Well, it's not,
That's the fee that we pay the outside counsel that represents the city at the board contract, or not the board contract, at the board licensing hearings. The
For the board.
The board,
Yeah.
yes, the board's
That's the-
counsel,
the board's
yes.
attorney, yeah.
And, the two additional inspectors, they're gonna be for the second shift from what hours to what hour?
It's to be determined. In my mind, they're what is the second check?
3 to 11, yeah.
Okay. Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Quick question, is there a written policy in place that triggers emergency hearing? Like what?
So the policy for emergency hearings is, for example, it usually happens on a Friday or Saturday night typically. And when that happens, we get alerted by police and everybody gets informed. Police report gets forwarded and then they advise us whether command staff wants an emergency hearing or not. And then that's when we attempt to make quorum. We need at least 3 board members to be able to make quorum. And then that's when Steph or I would generate the docket, depending on who it is. And we schedule it on a date and time. Well, not the date's definitely certain, but the time when everybody's available to make that quorum. And then that's when we post it on Secretary of State's website and through the city's open meetings portal notification system. And that's when we schedule a time to meet.
So decision is just made at the discretion of the command staff at the police.
So usually the command staff authorizes or says that they want the emergency hearing to take place. And then the assigned detective gives testimony or the sergeant gives testimony. And
But Jose, is the emergency hearing in the circumstance where a business is closed by the police?
no, the board.
By the board?
Yeah,
But in a closure circumstance?
in a closure, 72-hour closure.
Such as.
And then abundance of caution, in case there's a threat to public safety, ongoing threat, or an ongoing investigation, depending on the severity of what took place. And then that's usually up until the board can have a full show cause hearing where the facts are presented.
Just another quick question. Are Board of Licensees folks paid a stipend?
Are they paid? You know, just like, I don't know.
Let's 20 for regular, and just chairs of 29. Something like that.
I have it here.
Okay, yeah.
All right. 4 commissioners divided by 4, 83,000.
21,000 change
Okay.
for commission.
And
As a chair, 2,900 before,
shares 28,355.
and then paid by me, correct?
Yes, except for.
Well, that's the established salary. They have to earn the salary by attending the meeting.
Okay, so they don't attend meetings.
That's correct. That's correct.
Thanks.
Everyone finished with their questions? I have one, I'm sorry, one more final one. When the bar or the business owner feels a decision and goes to DVR, who, is there is the city representative at that hearing? Or the board of licenses represented by that?
It's usually counsel for the board and our city attorney.
All right, thank you. All right, well, thank you so much for staying and testifying. We appreciate everything you're doing.
Likewise, thank you for having me
Thank
today.
you. Thank you. Chief Hawkins. Sorry, Jeff. Okay. All right. Now moving on to legal, I have the motion to mark the presentation, I think, number 20.
Yes.
Exhibit 20.
Yes.
Motion.
Have a second, or a motion made by Councilor Pichardo, seconded by Councilor Law, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. All right, welcome, city solicitor. I know. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yay.
Madam Chairman.
Okay.
I was going to give an overview. I'll try to give an extremely brief overview. So the law department is the in-house counsel for the city. That responsibility entails a pretty lengthy list of obligations. A few examples of some of the things that the attorneys in our office do in our role as in-house counsel for the city are to advise on compliance with Open Meetings Act, with the Access to Public Records Act. We review all contracts that the city enters into. We advise on compliance with state and local purchasing laws. We represent the city in every case in which it is a party. There are currently just under 800 open civil matters in which we're representing the city. We represent the city at every level of state court, as well as in federal district court and the First Circuit Court of Appeals. We handle criminal prosecution in state district court. We also work with Department of Inspection and Standards to enforce housing and building codes and housing court. We prosecute licensing violations before the Board of Licenses as well as the state DVR. We enforce municipal code violations in municipal court. We handle the negotiation of all collective bargaining agreements and any, as Deputy Solicitor Ken Chiaverini knows, handle a wide range of labor and employment matters for HR as well as every city department. We staff every single city board and commission as well as council committees. We work with the assessor's office and the Department of Finance to resolve all tax appeal matters through the entire range of tax appeal process, which
if they make it that far, eventually end up in state superior court. Our team works collaboratively with any number of agencies and other public bodies throughout the state. And we're also a very active member of the International Municipal Lawyers Association. We're constantly working to enhance our knowledge and skills as municipal attorneys to better serve our client, the city of Providence. Welcome any questions.
Well, we tried Director Silveria. I appreciate the introduction, city solicitor, but
Sorry.
we skipped over for Director Silveria. I don't know if we actually need, everybody has it before them. Yeah, we'll save her breath, her voice, going through.
It's a very soothing voice.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question, and I'll kick it off and then I'll turn it over, is you have a number of defundings. Is there a reorganization? Because I also had a very hard time following the changes in our personnel supplement. So we just talked about, is there a reorganization? Why the changes in general?
So we've been consistently over the last several years working with finance and the council on creating paths for advancement within the law department. And so when there have been retirements at the higher levels, rather than seek replacements from outside of the department, we've tried to have promotions from within. Now, there haven't always been situations where we've had folks internally who aren't necessarily ready to move up to the highest level, but rather than fill a spot that then would not be available in the future for such a person, so there's always, I wouldn't call them substantial reorganizations, but at times we have more folks at the associate level than the senior level, or more at the senior than the deputy level. And so I think there's, at least in my experience in finance, and correct me if I'm wrong, but over the last few years, we've every year had a little bit of fluctuation in terms of the numbers of associate versus senior versus deputy. And the overriding reason is really to focus on creating opportunities for folks within the department to not have to leave and go elsewhere once they accumulate a certain amount of experience and skill.
I appreciate that. So in the supplement, we have the allowed 60, we have a number of 60, and now we're down to 31. So is there a decrease in that number of people in that department?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, there's a reduction of 2 full-time equivalent positions. The first position that was eliminated and will not be backfilled is the Associate City Solicitor Chief Info Security Strategist position. That position was discussed briefly when we were having an IT hearing. And so part of the way we freed up funding for the, I believe it's Chief Information Security Officer or some similar title, was by defunding this role in the law department, which is a vacant role, and was doing similar functions. The other position that is coming out of the budget is the Every Home Coordinator. That is a grant funded position, and the grant funding was eliminated in fiscal 2024, so that's why the total count and supplement went from 33 down to 31. Those are the 2 positions, and I believe I'm going to speak out to Jeff, but I believe they're working to repurpose the person who's currently in that role to fill a similar role in another department.
Okay, Madam,
Just a lot of, you don't mind. So I'm looking at the Boston report, and it's showing that you still have senior assistant city solicitor 1, 2, 4, 3, senior city assistant city. They never get caught up to what they should be.
That is technically correct according to the compensation ordinance. Last year, we tried to get rid of all the Roman numerals associated with associates, seniors, and for whatever reason, the class ordinance was updated to remove those new Roman numerals, but all except for the senior associate city solicitors were corrected in the compensation ordinance. And so those positions will get updated as soon as the compensation ordinance becomes in compliance with the classification ordinance.
So is the city no longer trying to do position control in Lawson?
It's,
That was the purpose.
right, so that was the point of trying, of breaking them down by 1 student group, maybe 8 years ago or something, but we just come to the realization that administratively, it's not working. It's creating more problems than.
Ask a follow-up, so it says the total salaries are proposed 3,031,880, but in our books, it's 2,946,555. Correct. So the supplement is different than what you have on your cover.
That's because the supplement is based on just account code 50010, whereas the sheet is total salaries, which includes overtime and longevity.
Thank you, sorry. I've asked my questions. Does anyone else have any questions? Yes, Council Pichardo, you go first.
How many lawyers do we have? In total?
20.
20?
Let me go count them.
We just added one, so I forget, sometimes I don't count myself.
I see the chart too. That includes also the school department.
Yeah, so there is one attorney, Deputy City Solicitor Charlie Ruggiero, who does exclusively work for the school department. And I believe, what is the reimbursement rate at this point?
We are negotiating with the school district to have them reimburse us for 100% of that salary in fiscal 2024. They're currently reimbursing 80% of the salary. However, it's my understanding that employee is spending 100% of their time.
Used to not spend 100% of the time, now he is, so.
You read my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So how many? Oh, you still got it. All right. Let's see.
I believe it's 20.
20. Also, just a question in terms of overtime, you guys do overtime. The private contractors. Decreased by almost more than 50%. Is that the way it's?
That's the consultants, right?
Private contractors, yes, those are your consultants.
Yeah. So that's for experts, and we had a very high expenditure for experts because of 2 major tax appeal cases. Manchester as well as National Grid, or National Grid, Narragansett Electric, Rhode Island Energy. That is still going on. We are still in litigation for appeals of several tax years by that particular entity. And so we will still need to have some expenditure for the expert that values such things as LNG and other assets that that taxpayer has. But a lot of the work has been done. So there was a very large expenditure last fiscal year, predominantly for that. Not exclusively, but predominantly for that.
And recently, I just had a sort of time to see some of the staff work, and one of them was in reference to one of the claims that was brought before our committee.
Yes.
Right. So do most of the negotiations that take place within the law department and yours, do we get them also too as a city council before, like negotiations, as you put, employment matters, that's actually very sensitive, but collective bargaining and stuff like that, what do city council or any particular committees, they brought those type of negotiations in sort of executive order not executive board, executive session to discuss whether we are also in agreement or some sort.
Sure. So all collective bargaining agreements have to be approved by the council. So at the end of the day, the council has to approve them. They also tend to be very sensitive to collective bargaining negotiations. In my experience, council leadership and various stages along the path of negotiating collective bargaining agreements is briefed. Not any particular committee, but council leadership is kept abreast of progress in collective bargaining negotiations.
So final decisions is just pretty much just keeping them informed, but not approved. It depends the matter.
Informed, as well as in conjunction with the administration and the finance department. And presumably the finance department, as well as the chief folks between council and administration also communicate about such things. But as far as when a final collective bargaining agreement is brought before the council, that's once there's a final tentative agreement that is then presented to the council for approval or not.
Yes, Council.
Thank you, and thank you for all you guys do. I have a few quickish questions. One is for 52120, fees not classified. Every year that's more than $1 million. What are fees not classified?
So most of it is for outside counsel. There's also stenographers and miscellaneous things such as that. But most of it is outside counsel. And so predominantly there's 3 reasons why we would employ outside counsel. One of them is for subject matter expertise. There's areas in which we just don't have internal subject matter expertise. Secondly is when there's a conflict. There are circumstances where there is a legal conflict or potentially a legal conflict with us handling a particular matter. And third, requirement under contract. For example, our collective bargaining agreement with the FOP requires us to provide outside counsel when they are sued individually, which is very common. It's not unique to Providence. I think that's a typical FOP requirement. So
it's in your budget, not in the.
That's correct. It's in our budget. All outside counsel.
And then in that same line, why is it going up $300,000 this year?
So I think that is making it more consistent with what it's been in the past. And then also going back to what I referenced before, where the contractors line is going down. We're now moving into the phase where we're going to be in litigation on the National Grid, Rhode Island Energy. And we have outside counsel assisting us with that. And we expect that to be fairly intense.
What is the National Grid? Is that the $10 million we saw in the news recently?
No, that was
a different-
Manchester. So that was a resolution of several years of tax appeals with Manchester. There was an outstanding potential liability of nearly 3 times the $10 million. The potential exposure the city has with these various tax appeals with National Grid is substantial.
And then another one. I guess more of like a larger, or not about a specific line item question. So you guys obviously are across so many different topics. It's mind-boggling. There's only 20 of you. I don't know how you do it. Across the different topics that you cover, I guess the question I'm trying to ask what are some of the patterns that you see? Like, are you seeing regular, claims and pending suits or something? Are there patterns that you see of things that you constantly have to represent the city on? And is there feedback loop to those departments to try and prevent things before we have to, not that I want you to have less work, but to try and get at some of the root cause, and like, how do we help create some of those feedback loops?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're constantly advising the various departments on, what we see.
Like proactively, or are they reaching out to you, or like what's?
No,
that
we
process like
proactively,
with that?
we advise the departments on any number of things. And when we're working with them on defending the city in cases, in addition to defending the specific cases, we're always making recommendations on how to potentially avoid them. And I'll note also that we, as a department, when we're defending individual cases, we also think about it holistically and try to ensure that we make hopefully good case law and don't walk into making bad case law that could harm us. Because we're a large entity in the state of Rhode Island, which means we're a party in a lot more lawsuits than almost any other party is. So precedent, case law matters a lot to us. And so we're always considering the potential future consequences of the choices we make on litigation, as well as how we advise the various departments and how to help us do that.
Yeah. Okay.
That's helpful.
That was helpful.
Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. First question, City Solicitor, is there any current vacancies in your department?
Yes.
What are those?
An assistant and an associate. We also, we have a vacant deputy position from a retirement, but we're at this point in time not, for the reasons I said before, where if we fill that position, I anticipate that it would be at a lower deputy for now.
So the current vacancy positions are lawyers?
Yes.
So my follow-up question on this is your department's capacity to proactively work with city council on writing and amending legislation. What's the current protocol policy?
We have, if any point in time that you request assistance with drafting legislation, drafting an ordinance, reviewing an ordinance, we are always available for that. We welcome that.
Is there a specific person in your department that, or?
So just actually contacting my assistant, who then knows what everybody's responsibility. She is best able to coordinate and make sure that any requests get addressed quickly.
Jeff, can I just jump in? There was one recently, Councilman Taylor had some concerns about increasing the 75-day rule for police retirees. So we worked with him, we worked with the FOP to get a document and ordinance change that he was happy with, the FOP, everybody was happy with, and I think it went right through ordinance, but he had made the request, and a couple nights after finance, he was asking me about it and input. So that's how that came about, and he knew I was someone, and Jeff, we could work right away, so.
And I guess, thanks for jumping in, because I know the council president had asked for a particular attorney to be assigned as a point person. And I had advised her that Deputy Solicitor Cheverini would be the point person. But whether it's contacting Deputy Cheverini directly, or me, or my assistant, any of those paths will work to get us to assist you with drafting any legislation.
And I mean, like, what's the protections of like keeping the legislation confidential?
I mean, we're a law office. What are you asking?
So
we
I
have
mean, like,
attorney-client privilege.
yeah, so that
of course
applies
we maintain
to us.
confidentiality. Yes, of course, it's your client.
In council, we have done that
Yes.
in a number of occasions, that when the council tells us this is, your baby and it's confidential, we keep that close to the vest and we don't tell anybody.
So we just have to tell you like straight up?
I think you call Jeff or,
Yes.
and you say, hey,
That has happened plenty of times, and we see that as our responsibility to maintain your confidence. So you say, we'd like you to draft an ordinance that does X, Y, and Z, and we don't want you to tell anyone that we're asking you to do this. We will draft an ordinance that we think accomplishes X, Y, and Z, and we won't tell anyone.
Fair enough. Thank you. My third question, thank you, Chairwoman. It seems like the tax appeals is something that's gonna be more and more common. Would it make sense to hire someone full-time that has expertise when it comes to that type of?
We
litigation?
already have. We have a senior assistant city solicitor who, that has been her primary responsibility for several years. That's Lisa Freeze. I think that her reputation in that world amongst the judges that see these cases, and with the attorneys with whom she does battle regularly. There are no attorneys in the state that handle this that are better. There are great attorneys, but that handle tax appeals, that represent entities that appeal these cases, but we have just as much talent fighting back. In addition to that, we have other attorneys in the office who work with her to assist her in these cases.
So I guess my follow-up question is, so what's the need for outside expertise on tax appeals?
Yeah, so we don't typically use outside counsel for those. In both the Manchester case and the National Grid Rhode Island Energy case, the potential exposure for the city exceeds, in those cases are massively important cases for the city. I don't really want to start getting into numbers because we're in litigation. What we did was we hired outside counsel that is not a tax appeal expert, because we have that already. And because we are the city of Providence, our attorneys who handle tax cases get more experience than just about anybody, because we handle so many. But these cases are so important that we felt it was beneficial to get somebody to be part of the litigation team who is a senior, experienced Superior Court litigator. And we were able to bring on an attorney who's very, very senior litigator with decades of experience, who is willing to take this on and be part of the litigation team at a very low hourly rate for the person's level of experience. And so teaming that up, a very senior experienced civil litigator with our own internal tax expertise was the right approach for handling cases of this magnitude.
Yeah, no, thank you. That makes sense. This last question, specific to the Manchester appeal. The first time I became aware of that specific was on a news article after a council meeting. Thinking back, I know it was briefly mentioned at a finance meeting that week. So I guess my specific question, was anyone in current council leadership informed, brief, aware that those numbers were coming down the pipeline?
I don't know, but well, maybe you can answer that. I don't know what current. Yeah.
So, Councilman Chair, the typical process as described by the city when there is appeal, the appealing taxpayer runs through the process of filing first and second appeal. Once it passes second appeal, which means there's going to be some contested matter, and really resides in the area of the assessor's office working with the city's law department. finance's role is always as an overseer of that process based on budget authority that we give settlement authority. There was no case that settled, no small or large, without the finance department being involved to the degree that we can accept a number and no greater than this authority under certain terms and conditions that we offer. And those terms and conditions almost exclusively is no cash settlement. We do not refund cash. They are generally settled in forward payments over a period minimally of 24 months, 8 quarters. And we intend to do that because most times the levy, as you know, you hear about our collection rate, is set at a rate lately no greater than 94% of levy that's assessed for the revenue portion. We believe that within that 6% window, there is revenue availability that in most cases we can afford to accept that type of a sum. In the case of the Manchester, it's exceedingly larger. This list would say that probably the exposure was 2 or 3 times greater. That would prevail on anyone's thinking that it would be time to settle in the best interest of the city, despite the fact that it was a high price tag. The typical tax appeal does not approach that range. But they do, and once again, it is an appeal process that could result in full court appearance, or it can result in mediation or negotiation prior to going into a full superior court case.
Yes, Madam Auditor.
Can you answer the question? Was the council made aware of the settlement? That was the question.
To my knowledge, it was not. But with due respect, Madam Chair and Madam Auditor, this is a process that has been well developed and has been in place certainly longer than my service to the finance department. And it was, with due respect, considered to be typical in the process of the city assessment and finance departments. But this did not seem to be out of the ordinary, despite the value.
Yes, Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Chief, for the explanation. And I get it, there's always been processes and protocols on how things have been done. But in this specific instance, I think it would just be a kind courtesy to brief at least council leadership on the numbers so we can respond to constituents in a digestive way, communication. So when we see an article like that, without having any information or knowledge, it really puts us in a pretty difficult position with our constituents. So I would ask for that courtesy going forward on settlements this size. There would be one request.
Again, Madam Chair, if I may, with courtesy to all of you, I clearly understand the sensitivity of that, and with due respect, once again, given that we were in the opening days and weeks of the new administration, the negotiations were at a sensitive point. We were trying to avoid it with the court. It was not, certainly not on my part, that of the assessor or the member of the finance team intended to be disrespectful or a matter that was not meant to be given trust and trustworthiness to the council. If not, that was decision was made that we needed to make a decision that was representative of what could be a fair and a prudent settlement that matter. But to your point, Councilman, by all means, there are teaching moments and learning moments that we will take that into consideration. Certainly, going forward, there would be a level of consideration.
Just to follow up on notification to council, they could be notified in 2 ways. Your annual report does not have any potential exposure on any case. That would be one clue that, okay, this is what we're in for, we have an idea. The second way is, and I have been asking your office for tax settlements because they are not going to the claims and pending suits as they should. They used to come through the tax certificates to the finance committee. At least they had a chance to see what was being abated and how much, as far as settlements are concerned. And that's not being done anymore either, and it has not been done since last year.
Madam Auditor and Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes,
before the
go ahead,
solicitor,
Chief.
there was a perfectly good reason why you do not provide disclosed information on potential litigation settlements, because you don't hand the playbook to the opposition. You would never tell them what we think the settlement value will be if we're in the midst of high negotiations. So with due respect to the auditor's question, I can't recall a time where we would advertise what we believe our liability is. It's the first move, I think.
I said settlement.
You had said in our annual report, we could put down what the settlements might be.
The previous solicitor did.
But we believe that would be in our view, that would be giving the opposition a stronger position in those negotiations if they were continued.
Maybe even help with pilot and knew how much we could lose.
Okay, all right, now we've got Counselor Vanderbilt.
Yeah, this is just a very minor point of like, I totally 100% understand that there are points at which it is very sensitive and we don't want to do that. But there's also a point at which the press was notified and we were not, and I found out something tweeted at. And that's just not something that I appreciate. And
I agree. Council, with due respect, the press wasn't notified independent of council. They were sitting in this room. COO, myself gave information about the need for budget and maybe the tax rate change. And they mailed that story, and that story seems like illogical, but it really would have been under normal conditions. So with due respect to all members of the council, it wasn't that they were getting preferential information. They were not given a heads up on it. There was no school. They heard what they heard in this room. That
Counselor Pichardo?
Yeah, so along those lines, it's been 4 months and the new administration, we're all really trying to wrap our hands around this and our mind. I think going forward, just so I think it's clear for the administration and also for law department and finance and whoever, is that I think that we don't want to be in the dark. I think that if it's not going to be brought before a committee, whether it's claims and defendant suits or finance, but at least in the leadership, the president and whomever she decides who should be privy to information, and let it be sort of opt-out versus opt-in.
we would be happy to work with the solicitor on the method of informing council leadership, minimally the president or the chair of the finance committee. We have no objection.
Yeah. So along those lines, I wanted to ask in terms of the, as you mentioned, the outside consultants of council. Again, just for my information, does that go out to an RFP or is just more internal, or that's not a normal practice in a sense within the legal department?
No, it does not go to our.
It doesn't. Should it be, or is that something, is that normal practice or?
No, an RFP for outside counsel would not be a normal practice. It's been specifically accepted in state law.
Then the last thing, Madam Chair, is that, like I heard earlier, if we ask in terms of the drafting policy, it should be the policy, any ordinance or law. I didn't hear this, but I just want to hear it, and it said it should be policy that is confidential. That we shouldn't, as a council people, we shouldn't have to say, oh, this is my baby, this is confident, keep it confidential. It should be confidential as a policy when we're drafting any piece of legislation.
Yes. We're very adamant about confidentiality, both with ourselves, and we constantly urge our clients to maintain confidentiality.
So it's policy, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I just have a quick question. On paid claims and damages, the 800,400. How did we arrive at that?
So that is a number that's consistently been budgeted forever and a day. And at the end of the year, when we do our audit, part of our requirements and regulations, we look at our outstanding cases and what has the potential to be settled that next year, if it's measurable, if it's known. And if it is, we have to book that expense for that audited fiscal year. So that number really gets looked at like holistically at the end of the year, but we don't ever budget millions of dollars for payments of claims and damages.
But do we have a true up or?
We true it up at that every year.
Okay. And then one thing for the city solicitor, why is it that we are not collecting our fees? That are we, when we bring cases to court, because we're trying to collect fines and fees, not fees, fines, more successful.
In housing court, we're very successful. I mean, the city didn't used to collect fees or fines for whatever reason.
DPW fines or, any other fines from any other department, I would think.
Well, I think that typically we've been very aggressive in a strategic way in housing court and collecting
fines from larger entities such as banks. In municipal court, I think we've been strategically, I don't know how to put it, so many of the folks who appear before municipal court who are assessed fines or fees have very limited incomes. And so we don't tend to be very aggressive about trying to enforce or collect fines and fees from folks that appear before the municipal court of limited means.
Madam Chair, I think that's likewise with when DPW, there's a negotiation that usually goes on in court with the administrator, the attorney's present. But it's usually the give and take with the individual who's been cited and with the administrator from Public Works, the attorney's present, and they lay out their limited income or the basis. And I think there's a lot of accommodation to the constituent for trash issues.
Okay, but for those violators who can pay,
I think that's a different story, but
I hope that we're very aggressively going after this.
I know our staff is
Yeah,
with the.
we are, and I'm more, like, we collect a lot more housing court because we have so many more housing court cases. I don't really have the numbers in my head for DPW. I'm very familiar with what we're doing in housing court, and we've been very aggressive collectors from certain defendants in housing court, and we're not with middle income owner occupiers. Our focus is on assisting them to comply with the housing code as opposed to trying to collect fines.
Madam Auditor,
I just want to follow up to the RFP process. There is a state law that says that you're not allowed to bid for attorneys, but it doesn't say that you do not have to go to the board. So he does write a letter to the board and just lists the number of all of the outside attorneys. But I still argue that we should be disclosing the hourly rate. He hasn't gone out this year. I don't know if the administration changed their mind on that, but he does give me a copy of the hourly rate that I have in case I audit, which I'm in the middle of, but sorry, everything's been taken over. So there is a discrepancy that we agree that we just have a discrepancy in that common ground, but he is correct, there is no RFP process.
So follow up on that for clarity. So the city solicitor gives you the hourly rate, but not.
The public, correct.
Is there a reason for that?
We work very hard to get below market rates for our outside counsel, and we just don't think it would be helpful to our efforts to get the lowest rates we can, publishing every rate we pay. But it's not inaccessible necessarily, because someone could APRA these things, could APRA the retainer agreements, and they do, and we provide retainer agreements that we have when folks seek them via.
So I mean, I guess the only concern would be with like overpaying. Is there any like mechanisms that protect Providence residents from?
Well, as the auditor mentioned, we do provide the rates that we pay to the auditor, and presumably if the auditor is reviewing them and determines that the hourly rates we're paying are excessive within the context of the market, the legal market that exists here, that the auditor would inform us of that concern, and you of that concern. We're extremely.
I don't have too much knowledge on the current market rate.
We're extremely confident that the hourly rates that we are paying are below market for each of the respective counsel that we hire.
Appreciate that. I like saving money.
Yes.
Okay, are we good?
Yeah.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
City's solicitor, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming before us tonight, thank you very much.
Madam Chair,
Chief,
thank you
Director,
so much.
Assistant Director.
Thank you for your courtesy, we appreciate it.
All right. Motion to continue. Motion to continue, yes, second, the motion to continue made by Councilor Anabas, seconded by Councilor Pissarro, all in favor? All opposed? We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Anabas, seconded by Councilor Sanchez, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Yes. We're getting out there.
I did a little bit of organizing.
I could tell.
Okay.